Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Oh, it is that time again, my friends. The wonderful disembodied voice greets you once again to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And welcome back. We are very thankful for you to join us. We are very thankful for you to join us. That can't be good English. We are very thankful that you're joining us here once again.
Are you going to be like this the whole show? I'm going to have to turn you down.
Oh, sorry. Well, I want to be heard.
You're just excited, I know. But nevertheless.
I just came from a meeting that was a little loud.
One of our 7 listeners is a sort of audio-inclined dude, so
yeah.
we want to please him.
Yeah, so welcome once again. This week I will say I really enjoy the topic that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
However, I think we can say that it is this was a little less intense to sort of research and the last couple weeks.
It's interesting. When we get to the list, we'll sort of explain why it's different than usual lists. And
well, yeah.
that alone, I think, explains why there was no kind of scratching and fighting over anything.
Yeah.
Because we just, you'll see.
They were pretty monster lists that we tried to do the last couple weeks. We sure hope you enjoyed them. I loved talking about that one last week with the uninterrupted.
Yeah, the
takes.
Unbroken Scenes, the
Unbroken
MLK
Scenes,
Day
man.
episode. That was a good one. I agree.
So,
that was fun. It's fun to talk about film school stuff.
Yeah,
get really into it.
It was
Hopefully,
pretty
it's fun
nerdy,
to listen to.
I think it was fun for you to listen to. I'm going to give you that opinion, dear listener.
Yeah.
I think you enjoyed it thoroughly. So much so that you're going to want to go and leave a review on iTunes.
Yeah, and if you didn't, I think we're still at the point in our relationship together where it's okay if you don't tell us that.
Yeah.
You can just, kind of feel it out. Keep that to yourself maybe for a little while. Our feelings are still a bit raw about our podcast.
Yeah. But I would say that if you want to, you certainly can still go to YouTube and look up The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan on YouTube. And you can see some of those scenes.
Yep. Not in the best quality, but it's YouTube.
It's YouTube. But if you're like, if you just need a reminder of the scene that we're talking about, you can take a look at it there. And then you can also still listen to some of the great tracks from the electronic film score episode.
Or, head on down to Blockbuster. Do they still have Blockbusters, right?
There's still one singular Blockbuster left in Alaska. Yeah.
We don't have any listeners in Alaska. Well, that I know of.
That we know of.
Yeah.
Someone could be bouncing their IP address to to hide their identity in Alaska.
That's true.
So how's your
either way,
yeah.
That Blockbuster, dear listener, I think they would welcome the business.
I'm sure they would.
Yeah, so
Goodness
check
gracious,
it out.
Yeah. So how was your week this week? You do anything fun?
Yeah, I was sick all week again. It's like getting close to 20 days of sickness, and it hasn't been the worst at any given moment, but it's been every kind of sickness you can get in like phases, and I am tired now.
Yeah.
And it's like it didn't, it wasn't the worst, so it didn't beat me down, but in the war of attrition against this cold, I'm beaten down.
Yeah, dear listener, I don't know, wherever you are, but there has been a cold that has been going around the greater Twin Cities metro area, and the characteristic of this cold is that it just kicks your butt for weeks. Yeah. It just kind of lingers. It doesn't, like you can still go to work, still go to school, right. Still do the things that you have to do, but man, it is annoying.
Yeah,
this one is annoying.
So that and I watched some stuff. I saw a movie from last year called Galveston that I really, really liked a lot. That you always hear me say, "Oh, I really liked it," but I hesitate to fully recommend it. Like I always recommend things with caveats because some of these movies that really knock me out admittedly aren't for everybody. Galveston is a story about these sort of low life characters who, in a really terrible situation, find each other attached in a weird way and form a connection that's very, very meaningful before everything goes to hell. And it I don't know what it was about it. It's got Ben Foster, who I really like. It's got Elle Fanning, who's pretty much good in everything these days. And just chooses really, really interesting stuff. Movie was directed by Melanie Laurent, who's most famous for starring, I guess, in Inglourious Basterds. She's the French woman in that movie. It's her third movie directing, and it's really good. If you're in the mood for something different, and if you think you can, I don't want to bring anybody down, but if you think you can take something that really does sort of kick you in the nuts, that's not the right term for the entire demographic of our listenership, but that's the kind of thing. I mean, but it did it in a good way. I mean, it makes you care, and caring is everything. I mean, when a film can do that to you, even if it's really mean to you, ultimately, I still think it's worthwhile. This story rings true. This is how this awful sort of mini crime, like just the smallest crime ever. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like none of it is worth it, You remember that Saturday Night Live skit, Don't Go Round the Rero?
Yeah.
Where they're making fun of all the British crime movies.
Yeah.
And one of the things the voiceover in the trailer says is, "Never has there been so much killing over so little money." And it's funny in that because those crime movies, they're always like, "Oh, we're gonna steal $100,000," and you're like, why everybody's, This is like that because it's just, like I say, they're lowlifes. I say that as a term of endearment, but it's true nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And this is their horrible, awful tale of woe, and it's worth checking out. Galveston.
In terms of it's not a tale of woe. I watched the documentary on Rose Marie, the actress Rose Marie.
Who was attached to Tim Burton all those years, right?
No.
Who?
Rose Marie from the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Who am I thinking of?
Attached to Tim Burton for all those days. You're thinking of Helena Bonham Carter?
No, that's who he left her for.
Oh, that I don't know.
Helena Bonham Carter must be something. She seems too weird for me. If she's too weird for Paul Giamatti, then she's probably too weird. But no, guys have left perfectly nice wives and significant others to, go with her. So she must be special.
Well, Rose Marie was also special. How was that for a segue?
That's great. I'm sorry, Dick Van Dyke. I mean, that's. I don't.
Yeah,
I'm not a Nick at Night Golden Age of television.
I grew up watching Dick Van Dyke Show on reruns.
It's great.
And so I only know Rose Marie from that. I had no idea she was this enormous child star. Like long before Shirley Temple was anything, there was Rose Marie, and she was this huge child singing sensation in this country, traveling all around doing the vaudeville circuit. Everything,
so as a live performer,
as a live performer, and then as a radio performer on like I think it was NBC or CBS.
Well, that's why,
yeah, and so but like. Had huge, like Al Capone came and saw her and said, and was like, Al Capone wants to meet you. So she came out and Al Capone, they put her in a car and they drove out to this house outside of Chicago, and in this house was like all of these, mobsters, and Al Capone at the head of the table, and they said, "We like you. If there's anything you ever need, And Rosemary's like, I always liked Al Capone. He was always the super nicest to me. He told me to call him Uncle Al. And so it was this fascinating, this woman who has, been literally in show business for 80 some years, since she started when she was like 3 or 4 years old.
Right.
And then, then kind of chronicling her, becoming
had sort of 9 lives in entertainment.
Yeah, and then and then obviously the Dick Van Dyke Show, and then after the Dick Van Dyke Show, then it was kind of this. She was able to sort of trade on her comedy chops.
Yeah. Did she do any Love Boat? Little fantasy?
Oh yeah, she did. She was big on the Love Boat.
She seems to.
She made a huge. She spent many years as the top center square on Hollywood Squares.
Nice.
It was like, I think she said something like, they asked me to come in for an afternoon to record like 3 episodes, and 5 years later I went home.
Nice.
Or something like that.
It's a good gig, Hollywood Squares.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not in the middle or the corners, you barely have to work.
Yeah. So I recommend, I believe the full title is Wait for Your Laugh. But it's about Rosemary. I highly recommend it.
That's very cool. The person I was thinking of, not to steal any of Rosemary's thunder, this is just, since I made a mistake, her name is Lisa Marie.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, she played Johnny Depp's mother in flashbacks in Sleepy Hollow, and she played the lead alien girl in Mars Attacks. And she essentially is this sort of physical, makeup and sort of specialty performer.
Yeah.
Kind of odd lady, like you would think somebody Tim Burton would date. And she's great, and I just wanted to say that's why I thought of her.
Yes.
It's not
of course, now that, as soon as you said her name.
If I'd have just shut up and let you tell your story, I could not have gotten the mistake just because half their names are right.
But you know what? Now Lisa Marie has made an appearance.
I think she's cool. And she's one of those people who was really very attached to a more famous and slightly more accomplished male, and when he was done with her, she kind of had nothing to do. Yep. And it's, I don't want to bring everybody down again, but I find that a little bit tragic.
So yeah, well, if you want to get picked back up after getting let, boy, these are really strange segues. But of course, you can always reach out to us on Twitter and Instagram at Ask Joel and Ryan, the movie show page movie show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook. Please, if you're listening to us on Spotify, please leave a review. It will help us get the word out about our podcast. You can always reach out to us also at askjoelandryan@gmail.com. And as we always say here on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, where's the beef? We will lift you up after we've thoroughly knocked you down. So this week we have we're gonna enter the world of TV again. Woo! Yeah. Who doesn't like TV? Yay, TV! Yeah. And of course we're gonna talk about TV on The Countdown. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, this week's list. A little Joel and Ryan recommends list. Kinda, yeah. I mean, it's that. I mean, it's kind of always that, but I think this one in particular goes for that in a big way, and sort of forgoes. We didn't think too hard about this. We just came up with a pile, and we're going to do them all. Yeah, there was not. They're in order, but almost when you look at the list, overlap. They're not really. In order. There's. I mean, and really, we're talking about. Well, what we're talking about this week is television one season wonders. Yeah, shows that were on for one season and then canceled, or less, or less. A handful of them, and in some cases. Excuse me. In some cases, these shows were cut mid-season, and you had to, fans begged, saying, "Can you at least show the rest of the episodes that you shot?" Yeah, and we're kind of doing 2 top 5 lists. Joel did one, and I did one, and there was some common ground actually. When I saw your list, I did a list that, I think my list would have included a couple of your things. Yeah, but not the majority of them. But I kind of did an alternate list. Yeah. And I think between the two, which we'll do kind of together here,
I think people like TV. There's something for everybody on this
Yeah,
list.
and what's great is even though these shows are gone, and some of them have been gone for a while, they're because of things like Netflix and Amazon, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu,
Blockbuster.
and frankly, even just scouring the internet, you should be able to find all of the shows that we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, almost all of them.
And we think that they're worth giving a go because there are a myriad of reasons why a show doesn't work on network television or non-network television. But there are so many intangibles that go into a show being a hit that you can't count on.
Well, it goes to show because everybody who worked on every single one of these shows, every single one of them is like a major star of some kind or went on to just make big money in Hollywood or their next show hit just right. But these all failed, and we still look at them and go, oh, why did they fail?
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously some shows get canceled because they're just not good.
Right.
I would say most shows get canceled because they're just not good.
And I don't know. I actually think I'm gonna have to disagree with you a little bit. I kind of see what you're saying, but I think there's a show for everybody. I think just attaching yourself to mass appeal numbers in television. Especially when the bulk of these came out. These days it's a little easier because they do them on the cheap. There's a billion formats.
Yep.
They can focus on tiny little demographic groups of people. Back then on networks, you had to hit 8 million people at least watching your show, and if you only got 4 million, you were a failure.
Yeah, and by back then, most of these shows that we're talking about here,
they're fairly modern.
Yeah,
they're
fairly
from when
modern.
we graduated high school.
They're certainly like the latest show on our list would be My So-Called Life, I think. Which
you're
we'll
sort of spoiling the list.
No, I'm not. There's one that's even earlier than that. But anyway,
either way, the early '90s till today, Joel and I's adulthood. We've done a kind of childhood episode. This is our list of TV shows that failed sadly when we were men.
Right. So let's start with your number 5. It's from 2009.
Yeah.
The Unusuals.
Yeah, nobody saw this show. I mean, everyone's going, the what?
Yeah.
It's a terrible name for a show. Other than that, everything about this show was awesome. The Unusuals was a cop show. It was about Manhattan detective precinct, And get this, it starred a bunch of cool people, but it starred a pair of partners that were just fantastic. The first one in the kind of A team on the show, homicide, major crime detectives, were Amber Tamblyn and Jeremy Renner. Amber Tamblyn plays this. She's from a New York society family, and she's she's got an advanced degree and is really smart and. She's considered slumming it by being a cop.
Yeah.
Jeremy Renner plays this exact opposite. I think he lives like in a boiler room or something, like at the bottom of some building. Like he's just this total dirtbag. But it's Jeremy Renner, so in this very hip and ironic way. And the two of them are great. Opposites attract. They had great chemistry, and they were very, very cool. But the show's real brilliance, and this sums it up better than anything, was our B team, who was one of my favorites in all of television. Harold Perrineau, who you guys all know from Oz, maybe, and certainly Lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in all kinds of other things. He was in the second two Matrix movies. Harold's a fantastic actor, and he plays a guy whose father and grandfather died shortly before their 42nd birthday. And he's about to turn 42. 42 is a fun number in the lore of drama and literature, so that's fun in and of itself. But he's terrified of dying. It's really funny. There's this one episode where you go to his apartment, and all he has is like inflatable furniture and like nothing with any hard corners or anything. He's just taken this whole fear that he has way too far. And he is partnered up with Adam Goldberg, who's, from Saving Private Ryan and all kinds of stuff. Goldberg's fantastic actor. And he plays this sort of Serpico-looking guy who has just found out. He doesn't tell anybody, but the show starts with him being told by a doctor that he has inoperable cancer and that he's going to die. So he's completely reckless and madhouse in the show because he's not going to make it, so he doesn't care. So it's funny, the two people who don't get along kind of find their way through the show. These two guys who've been pals forever and partners and work great together are completely at odds, and one of them doesn't even know why.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a clever idea, I can't stand it. I don't know if that could have gone very long for a show, but The Unusuals, if you like cop shows and you like them on the weird side, because the crimes are all super weird. That's the other thing that's fun about the show.
Yeah, the whole that little unit is tasked with. I think I remember seeing from the trailer, they're tasked with investigating crimes that, that have been, that are just sitting open for years or for a while, and like with no leads and unusual circumstances, I think, which is where the part of where the cleverness of the title.
Yeah, but it's a fun show. Those guys, that I just named, they're all awesome, and it's not different from this. The guy who wrote the show, the showrunner for it, was Noah Hawley, who went on to do television's Fargo, which is fantastic, and he is also the showrunner and executive producer of Legion, which is fantastic. Both of those shows are odd and weird, and The Unusuals doesn't approach quite the absurdity of those shows, but it has that little bit of that at the heart of it, and that made it really great. That, along with some really vivid characters and snappy dialogue, made it great.
My number 5 show was from the following year, 2010. It's also a cop show, and I think it's also it's very similar. It's The Good Guys.
Yeah, Good Guys.
Yeah, it starred Bradley Whitford and Colin Hanks. Colin Hanks, very buttoned down by the book.
A very modern cop with modern crime solving techniques and into science and into database searching, that sort of thing.
And his girlfriend is the assistant district attorney who helps he's able to lean on her a little bit to get inside scoop. But he's partnered with Bradley Whitford, who is old school, like 70s.
He's not even old school. He's this guy who dreams of being Magnum PI, but he's just a loser, alcoholic jerk.
Yeah, who's cashing in on one heroic act he did.
but he's oddly lovable anyway.
And he's, he drives around in like a 75 Trans Am, wears the brown leather jacket no matter what the temperature is outside. He's, big old bushy mustache. It's charmingly funny. It's, going up against all the procedurals, the Law and Orders, the CSIs that were, that just saturate the airwaves, especially and at this time too. It was just all these procedurals. I think a show like The Unusuals and a show like The Good Guys, they were too quirky. That there were lots of action, lots of clever and witty dialogue, but it just was I think it was just too much for audiences to too clever for audiences to get behind.
I think you're probably right. The Good Guys was the creative mind behind that was Matt Nix, who's most famous for doing Burn Notice.
Yeah.
But he's done a whole bunch of shows actually, and he's a pretty clever guy. Good Guys was shot entirely on location in Dallas, which gave it a really cool personality that not a lot of shows have. They did 13 episodes of it, and Fox thought for sure they had a hit. They loved it so much that they renewed it through the end before anyone had even ever seen it. Mm-hmm. And then they aired it as a mid-season replacement, and they realized they were sunk, and so they kind of aired it all summer until they were gone.
Yep.
That was a really, really fun show. I'll never forget my favorite Bradley Whitford moment. There's a whole bunch of them. I told Joel about this one. Is he's up in the morning, hungover or whatever, and some crime happens across the street from where he gets his coffee, and he runs over there, and jumps on the hood of not the car that's doing the crime, but some pedestrian's car, and they freak out and start driving, and he's hanging on to it, and he starts screaming at the top of his lungs, "I'm commanding this vehicle!" Like he doesn't even know the word commandeering. He's only a cop so far as what he's seen on TV. It's so funny, and yet he kind of has a sense of justice, and he's really lovable. It's a fun role for Bradley Whitford.
Yeah, it was good. I mean,
and it's perfect for Colin Hanks too, because who's better at just being the straight man than him? He's fantastic and lovable.
He was very much able to tap into that. The Tom Hanksian sort of
right.
Just not the goofy Tom Hanks, but the more straight arrow Tom Hanks.
Right, Tom. When you paired him with a crazy other comedian like Dragnet Tom Hanks, I guess. Very similar characters, actually.
Yeah. So good guys. Yeah,
it's a fun one.
That was a fun one. Number 4. Number 4 on your list. I did kind of spoil this a little bit earlier when I was talking about the dates.
Well, here it is.
Here it is.
Not a spoiler anymore.
No, it's My So-Called Life.
This is a lot higher. I think this show and the next show are a lot higher on most people's list, actually. But they made it on our list, so we should.
No, they're
they should be happy. My So-Called Life is a fantastic show. I don't know how much of the minutia I should talk about, but I'm just kind of killing time. But it starts kind of with 30-something, which Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz did, and was very popular, baby boomer stroking show, where the people on TV had the same problems as you and me. There weren't a ton of shows like that.
No.
But they made a really, really good one, and then that was... that actually had a pretty long life. This show was something of a follow-up to that. One of their main writers on that show, they sort of promoted. She was the showrunner for this. Can't remember her name.
Winnie Holtzman.
Yeah, and she made My So-Called Life in the early 90s. It's basically a teenager show. It's a high school show, but you can tell that its heart is more of like... It's more of a family drama, if that makes any sense, right?
Sure.
Is that right?
Yeah, I would,
There's two families. There's our lead character played by Claire Danes, sort of her first, not her first thing ever, but like kind of her arrival on the scene. She beat out Alicia Silverstone for that role.
Boy, what a different show that would be.
Well, Claire was 13 when she was auditioning for it. Alicia was 16. Alicia was emancipated. So she could have worked all hours, and they really loved Claire Danes to the point that they took her on knowing they'd have to adjust the whole show to have her.
Wow. And
she is the show.
Yeah.
Claire Danes is a spectacularly good actor, and she's really, really good out of the gate on My So-Called Life. She holds the whole thing down. It's her family at home, her parents and her siblings, and it's her family at school, her best friends, and her crush.
Yep.
Jordan Catalano, that's a name in television that you have to say the whole name, which is part of why I love it. Mm-hmm. It's never Jordan. It's always Jordan Catalano. Played by Jared Leto. Also, really kind of the first time we ever saw him.
Yep.
He's fantastic in it, too. Perfect kind of heartthrob. But it's more than that. It's the first time we really saw characters where there wasn't a very special episode about domestic abuse. There's 2 key characters on the show who have suffered some kind of abuse, and it follows like it does. It follows them through their entire lives, and it's part of everything on the show.
Yeah.
It's the first sort of, I believe, the first openly homosexual teenager also made his appearance on the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. It's really, really wonderful show. I mean, I really loved My So-Called Life. I caught a couple of them when it was on TV, but MTV, when it was about to get canceled by ABC, took all 18 episodes or whatever and aired them over like a 4-week period.
Yeah.
Like at night at 6 o'clock, and I taped them all. I would come home and watch them. First show what do you call that? Shotgun in a show?
Binging.
Oh, yeah, binging. I don't know why I always forget that. I don't binge a lot of shows.
Yeah, you don't binge a lot of things in general.
Well, this was the first show I binged, if you can call one a day binging, which to me at the time, it definitely was.
Yeah.
And it got so popular on MTV when it found its teen audience, when ABC was trying to sell the next 30-something, and this wasn't that. This was for kids.
Right.
that it was gonna get renewed. It was gonna get that second season, and everyone's gonna have a happy ending. And Claire was doing Romeo and Juliet already, and didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm gonna go be a movie star now. Which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. I'll get to my point about that. All these shows, it's sad that they went away, and that's why they're on this list.
Yeah.
But there's something perfect about them because they're on this list too, and we'll talk about that at the end.
I think that's pretty astute.
This definitely fits that mold.
Do you think that there was anything like, because all the teen shows at the time were all like 90210? They're kind of this.
No, that's great. I didn't think of that.
I mean, and
I know
and
where
so,
you're going.
Yeah,
with
and
this.
so when My So-Called Life comes out, and it's again, like you said, it's like
It's not a
30-something.
soap opera.
It's not a soap opera. This is trying to be a little. It's trying to be more. It's just trying to be a little bit more real, more a little deeper. Do you think that's maybe one of the reasons why? At least it. I mean, it was critically. I mean, I remember it being pretty critically acclaimed, but it just didn't have the viewership.
Right. And even then, like I said, I think it's the only show here. I mean, all these shows, not all of them. There's a handful of them that did find their audiences ultimately. This, My So-Called Life, found its audience in time to save it, and it couldn't be saved because of scheduling issues and whatever.
Yeah. Speaking of shows that were that the audiences rose up and tried to save.
Yeah.
My number 4 show is Freaks and Geeks.
It's a great show.
NBC on in 1999 into 2000. Show's created. This was Paul Feig and Judd Apatow creating a great show about high schoolers, and you have Linda Cardellini.
She's great.
Who's fantastic.
She's done well for herself, but it's a shame. That show should have made her a big star because she's fantastic.
Yeah, and she was so great in it as the. I can't remember if she was a junior or senior.
I can't remember either.
Yeah, but dealing with the impending end of high school, and also that struggle to find who she is and where does she fit into all of into that societal cliqueness of high school. And then you have her little brother who's starting high school as a freshman and his friends. But again, this and of course, and he's just a mess. The kid is, these are not the cool kids coming into school.
None of them are.
None of them
are. They're either freaks or geeks. It's pretty clear who's who too when you watch the show.
But the show gave us Linda Cardellini, Seth Rogen, James Franco, Jason Segel. And
the list goes on.
I mean, Martin Starr,
Busy Phillips. It's a fantastic ensemble cast, full of people who are now big stars. It's written and produced by two guys who are both big time film directors, and it's one of those shows where the magic of that is there, and there's love for the project that's very clear when you're watching it. And it's such a breath of fresh air. I don't really compare my childhood shows to 90210 or whatever, but like compared to something like the John Hughes movies or stuff, where I don't want to rip on those for those of you who like those, but everything on those is a stereotype and is sort of superficial, and sometimes it embraces the way those things can come together or whatever. That's about as hopeful as those ever get. These feel like real people. It feels like the real sort of experience of kids that age.
Yeah.
So both of these shows, they're kind of about 6 years apart or whatever, but they both were the best sort of teen dramas on TV really ever. And I'll say this before we move on because we have to. I think both of these are usually very, very high on these lists. I think I put My So-Called Life down here because I think it's a nice compliment to Freaks and Geeks. This is where Freaks and Geeks was on your list. But you'll find these tip top as far as the best one and done TV shows of all time.
And I absolutely can see, I like it a lot. I can see why it's a lot higher on people's list. I personally have, these are it's our show. I get to be,
exactly.
I get to put my favorites up at the top.
It's got its privileges, that's for sure.
And of course, Freaks and Geeks, later on the same team, Paul Feig, Judd Apatow, along with some of these same actors, tried it with Undeclared, which was essentially kind of the same idea, but putting it in college. And that only lasted one season. That was also, they.
I'm convinced if NBC knew what they had, because it's not Fox. Fox bails on stuff in a hurry. NBC keeps shows around sometimes just because they're good.
Yeah.
Maybe not anymore. Those days are over. But back in the 90s, early 2000s, NBC was notorious or famous for, it's really good. Let's just give it a little longer, know. I don't.
But what they felt was good. They're the NBC also they were so hell bent on dominating Thursday night.
Yeah.
And then after that Thursday night juggernaut of Cosby Show, Family Ties, and
they
all
couldn't
those
really
away.
afford to have too much faith in other things.
Yeah, they pushed things like Suddenly Susan and The Single Guy and stuff on us, and they shoved those down our throats and said they're hits.
Yeah.
Damn it, this is a hit.
Yeah.
When
you
when
put it between your other hits. And so
whereas if they could have,
those weren't terrible shows.
No, they weren't terrible shows, but they were told to, they were hits because NBC told us they were hits.
Right.
This is a hit. Yeah. You will watch it.
Yeah.
It's Thursday night. But no, Freaks and Geeks. I agree. If NBC would have been able to figure out what they have. There's a great it's either GQ or Esquire maybe 2 years ago at some anniversary of Freaks and Geeks. Maybe about 3 years ago. Then that would have made about 15 years or so.
Uh-huh.
It was like they got everybody in a room, Apatow and Feig and a lot of the actors, and just did a chronicle of what that whole season was like, and it's a great article, and I know it's out there.
That's very cool. That's worth tracking down.
So it's worth tracking. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll link to it on.
And Freaks and Geeks is worth. Every episode is really cool.
I'll
say, as far as the networks go, all these networks are the villains for canceling these shows, but they're also the heroes for putting these on in the first place. Some of them.
Yeah. So our number three show. My number 3 show is a show that literally, when I put it on the list, the first thing Ryan wrote back was, "What?
What's that show?
What is Clone High?" And Clone High, or as it was on MTV, they listed it as Clone High USA.
Nice. That's never bad to add the USA at the end.
But Clone High is an animated show. It was aired on MTV. It was actually originally aired in Canada on the Teletoon, I think is what the Canada.
Yep. I lived in Canada for a while. I remember Teletoon.
So this was developed for Teletoon, and MTV aired most of the episodes. And MTV, I think when they got it, they're like, what are we doing? I guess we'll put this on. They kind of, it was all scattered around.
Yeah, and that doesn't help.
Because I was a giant nerd, I sought this show out.
Sure.
It was created by Bill Lawrence, Phil Lord, and Christopher Miller, who that's the team that brought us Scrubs. It was. And
Phil Lord and Chris Miller making big time movie comedies now. They're famously the two cats that were fired from Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Yep.
But they've also made the 21 Jump Street movies, which are very popular. They're the masterminds behind the Lego movie, which is extremely fun and popular. It's that kind of humor mixed, I guess, with Bill Lawrence's more sardonic sort of style, right?
The show is about, I mean, and the
more like
the
Scrubs
opening,
than the Lego movie.
Yeah, more like Scrubs than the Lego movie.
But still has some of that crazy goofiness.
Yeah, because the show, it's about back in the 80s, some secret government agency dug up and got the DNA of famous people in history, cloned them, and now they're all teenagers in high school together. So some
examples would be.
So our main character is Abe Lincoln. and he's voiced by Will Forte.
And they're all high school age.
They're all they're all the same age, regardless of history. They're all in the same age. So you got Abe Lincoln, who's kind of he's a likable dork. You have Gandhi, his best friend, who is a party
Gandhi
animal.
would make a good sidekick.
Yeah, he's a party animal.
Yeah.
Joan of Arc, who's kind of like the alt chick who is in love with Abe Lincoln, but won't can't bring her. She doesn't want to admit her feelings, and then you have the big man on campus, who of course is JFK, and the queen bee of all of the high school society is Cleopatra. And so you got Cleopatra and JFK. JFK, total womanizer, getting it on with every chick, Marie Antoinette. The show is, and it's just filled with all these fantastic, like Marie Curie. Her DNA has been messed up from all the radiation, so Marie Curie is, there's so that cloning did not go well. You have, George Washington Carver makes an appearance, and I mean, there's just all, it's just layered upon, layered with all this great stuff it had.
It's a concept that has very few limitations.
Yeah, and it was really funny. And boy, it hit me. The show came out in 2002, so it was kind of perfect. But I didn't discover it until 2003, which was around when MTV was airing it. And it was right when I moved back from New York and had all this time on my hands. Moved back from the Twin Cities from New York, and so I just was sitting around and I just watched this show, and it was a riot.
I'd never heard of it, but it's got some big names associated.
Yeah,
with it,
sure. And again, because of the Scrubs connections, you had guest stars like Donald Faison. Michael J. Fox has a brief little cameo.
Nice. Does he play himself?
No, he plays one of Gandhi's kidneys. That's really,
that says it all.
Yeah,
right there. Michael J. Fox is Gandhi's kidney. There's a whole episode. Oh my God, Luke Perry from 90210 is I believe it's Ponce de Leon in there, and who's like the dreamy new guy, very much like what's his face, like his character on 90210, who's I can't remember his character's name. Dylan, yeah, a lot like Dylan, but he's Ponce de Leon. Just really, high concept, very silly, all over the place. I totally get why it did not catch on, but man, it absolutely hit me in all the right spots. Yeah, something like that. It's too bad that it started out as a Canadian thing. No offense to Canada, but it means that whoever brings it down here doesn't really believe in it, and MTV's a good place for it. But MTV needed to stick it somewhere and stick by it and play the reruns over and over again so that it's
the kind of show. Yeah, it's the kind of show. If Adult Swim existed at this time,
before its time, most
it would have done
are.
well. Yeah, that's a common theme with a lot of these, is just ahead of its time.
Sure.
Your number 3 show. I forgot all about this show until you brought it up. And it was the only reason to ever watch ABC show. Family for me. And
it's the only reason I ever did.
Yeah, and the show was called Bunheads.
Bunheads by Amy Sherman Palladino.
Yep, who of course brought us now the
Gilmore Girls.
Gilmore Girls and Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh, is that her?
Oh, it's her. Yeah, and that which is
she's great. I call her the female Aaron Sorkin, or maybe Aaron Sorkin is the male Amy Sherman Palladino. I'm not sure where the chicken and the egg is there, but she writes. She's like this dialogue. She lives in the dialogue. Her characters live in the dialogue, right? If you watch Gilmore Girls, then you know what I'm talking about. I don't really need to explain it very much, but they chip, 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 chatter, chatter, chatter. It's very noisy, but she has a very unique voice, and that voice lives in all these characters in a way that's not necessarily realistic, but a way that's terribly entertaining, and in a way that doesn't stop us from believing that they're real people with a real soul and everything else. Bunheads is just I don't know, it's kind of an old school setup, really. There's this Sutton Foster, who's a fantastic actress. Man. She plays ex kind of Broadway chorus person / national tour, hustler who did that work but struggled to consistently find work, becomes a Vegas showgirl, really for the security, because that's a gig that happens every night. You can live in an apartment. Mm-hmm. You don't get rich, but you can get out there and dance and get paid and have a life.
Yeah.
But she doesn't really love her life. She marries a guy in Vegas, one of those Vegas marriages. What's his guy's name? The guy from Ferris Bueller, Alan.
Oh my God, you're right. It's Alan.
I can't remember his name. He's also the really funny tourist guy in Speed.
Yeah.
Really good actor. He doing his best sort of older guy work here. He marries her, brings her to his hometown, and it's not a spoiler alert to say that he promptly dies and kind of leaves her there. And she gets attached to her mother-in-law's dance school, which she's certainly qualified to help out with. And she kind of intermingles with the lives of these girls who take ballet classes there. These teen girls from the town. There's 4 principals, all of whom are brilliant in their own way. It's Bunheads is a great show. Again, it's another great teenager show where the emphasis on the teenagers and their problems is just so believable and cool, and it's got its troubles, but I don't have anything bad to say about it. The only thing bad about Bunheads is it's not Gilmore Girls. If you're a Gilmore Girls fan, you really should have already seen it. If you haven't, you should, and you just get over the fact that it's not Gilmore Girls from the start, because it's somehow even more low budget than Gilmore Girls, which was not a high budget show. It's just, it's ABC Family. It's kept very tight, just a couple of locations. It's got a sort of delightful dance sequence almost every episode. And
we all
Sutton,
know how Ryan
who's
feels
awesome.
about dance sequences.
And they're very cool in this.
No,
their dance
good,
sequences. It's not like a musical where they break out into dance. It's not like Fame, but the dance sequences are the school performing them. But they're very cool, and they, it's clever. They tie into the show thematically, kind of in a way. I like that show, and you guys.
And Sutton Foster is great, and
it.
should be and she's a Broadway superstar, but she should be a much bigger film and
she is a
television
Broadway
star.
superstar,
Yeah,
and
she's
there's
Broadway
nothing
superstar.
wrong.
No,
with
there's
that.
nothing wrong with that. But she should be.
But
she
to
should
me,
be more
this
well
was
known.
kind of like Linda in
I love
Freaks
her.
and
She's
Geeks.
so good.
This was her role. This was the role she should have played on TV. The show should have had 5 seasons so that we remember her as this person.
Yep.
Because it is her. They wrote this. I think they must have wrote it for her.
Yeah.
Because this character has lived Sutton Foster's life to some degree.
Yeah.
Just without the success.
Yeah.
And she's fantastic in it. And Kelly Bishop, who played the Gilmore's, mom on the show. Ed Herman and Kelly Bishop were the parents on Gilmore Girls. Kelly Bishop's in it too. She's fantastic as always.
Alan Ruck was the
Alan
name
Ruck,
trying to
right?
pull. Yeah, I knew it was another 4-letter word.
He's a good actor, and I just want to give a shout out to him because he enters like a whirlwind and exits the show very quickly, but his spirit gets kind of carried through the show in a very neat way. I won't spoil the details, but it's a good one.
Bunheads is really good. My number 2 show. I don't want to talk too much about this because it's really tremendous.
It'll end with us just reenacting the whole thing.
It's a sketch comedy show, and it was it's really the prototypical like sketch comedy show ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And this was the Ben Stiller show.
Yeah, that was a good show.
Yeah, and it won an Emmy for writing. For comedy writing, and was promptly then canceled.
Yeah.
But this cast, your 4 main people on this cast,
and they really did the bulk of the work.
This was not Saturday Night Live where you had a guest star and it was there was guest stars in these sketches.
It was I can say it was other than the last person on this list. It was the first time I'd seen any of these people.
Yeah. Ben Stiller.
Yeah.
Andy Dick. Janine Garofalo and Bob Odenkirk.
I mean, that's
and then also
so good.
And David Cross was a writer on it, and and later was on camera. It was just spectacularly hilarious.
Very much. It's a crazy. You go back and watch it now, and it's a very crazy time capsule because it really was like all great sketch comedy. It came out of what was happening in the world at the time.
Yep.
Just to give you one example, we don't want to go too much into this, but one of my favorite segments on it, other than Bruce Springsteen trying to create
which real quick, the answering machine message that was how I was introduced to this. Was you said you got to see this sketch?
It wasn't even a sketch. It was like little bits and pieces in between, like
this was an interstitial. It was a segue.
Yeah, it was a segue between the commercials where they'd cut, and he's still trying to make a answering machine.
Yeah,
message.
and they're
so
like,
funny.
this week it's
But my favorite, it was Kill Doug Shafke.
Oh God,
there's so many
buckets,
funny sketches, but Kill Doug Shafke, Ice-T's Cop Killer had just came out, and he had gone on these talk shows and said, "Hey, it's not. I'm not telling people to kill cops. I'm not talking about any specific cops, blah, blah, blah." And Ben Stiller, I don't want to take away the cultural significance of Ice-T's Cop Killer. That was an important song at the time that had every reason to exist. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But Ben, being Ben and being young and reckless at the time, completely, nothing to protect.
Yeah.
Came out and he pretended to be this rapper on the show who wrote this song called Kill Doug Shafke.
Yeah, it was Bob Odenkirk as this rapper.
Yeah.
And Andy Dick is Doug Shafke.
Doug Shafke, his next-door neighbor that he's quarreling with. And he writes this song, and of course this whole posse shows up to kill this guy. And he's all like, "Man, I'm not talking about any specific Doug Shafkes. It's just about, like, everybody has a Doug Shafke in their life or whatever." And meanwhile, there's these guys they're shooting with automatic weapons up, and Andy Dick's hiding behind his turned-over car.
Yeah. God,
and the lyrics are like... What, something...
Oh, boy. It was like...
It's like... the guy lives on Elm Street, 4211. Sucker gets home right around 7. Kill Doug Shafke.
Yeah.
It was super... I mean, at the time, it was super funny because it was...
Yeah, it showed off... The show was great. It showed off Ben Stiller's ability for imitation, for impersonations. He's able to do. He does his Tom Cruise, his Bruce Springsteen, his De Niro.
Very fun. And I would be remiss to not mention Janine Garofalo.
And Janine Garofalo,
I fell instantly in love with on that show.
Yeah, and she, and it's very it's this was early Janine Garofalo. It's certainly
the very
not,
first time I'd seen her do
certainly
anything.
Not as
not that sort of 90s downer kind of whatever.
The singles, or no, it was the singles that she
had a little bit of that, right? But the opening starts with her and she's bouncing around like having a great time, and then like on a dime she stops and mopes away.
Yeah, and so that's the perfect. She's game. She's game for all of these sketches. Yeah. She does a really good. And I'm thinking of the Cape Evil or Cape Fear. Sketch where she does the Juliette Lewis character. It's really funny. But anyway,
those four people are incredibly funny. They are nonstop. Every sketch on that show is funny in some way.
Yep.
I haven't seen it in ages, so it is very much of its time.
Yeah.
But I still believe it would be funny if you watched it now.
It to me, so much of it holds up. I usually I get that DVD out and watch it.
Cool.
Pretty frequently. Your number 2.
My number 2 is Kings. Kings, I'll kind of run through this because Kings really is its premise. Kings was NBC's idea of doing a prestige HBO style like Sopranos drama. Something to compete with that level of serialization and sophistication in storytelling, and they did it. They got it. It just turns out that NBC audiences on Sunday nights after football didn't want to watch that.
Yeah.
At all, because nobody watched Kings, despite NBC pimped it hard when it first came out.
Uh-huh.
They stole Ian McShane fresh off of what's the Western? Deadwood, which had just been canceled. They scooped him up. Young guy, Christopher Egan, he is actually still busy and does all kinds of cool stuff. It is the biblical story of kings from the Bible. It's the story of Saul and David, the two kings of Israel. It starts out with David, Christopher Egan's character, defeating a tank called Goliath in this battle between these two nations. Which
a contemporary, it's a biblical story, but contemporized.
It's contemporized, right? Yeah, it's hard. It's a little hard to explain, but it is contemporary. It takes place in modern times, maybe even future times. It's not clear. It takes place in a world that's not ours and yet is our world. It's not necessarily America, but it's a country like America, but it's a monarchy and not a democracy. And Ian McShane he's a titan. Anytime he's in something, and more so in Kings, I think, than just about anything, because in Kings he's given a big part to bite off. That's a real drama part. There's none of that winky sort of Ian McShane would be great at this. Let's load it up with, isms for him to do. This show doesn't have any of that. It's played very, very straight and awesome. Sebastian Stan plays this young prince, the first time I'd ever seen him in anything. He's gay in the show and closeted, and the prince can't be gay. He's going to be king.
Yeah.
So he's like a friend, but also a rival of David, our hero. It's just fantastic, man. I'm just going to read a couple things, and then we'll move on from this because we can't spend too much time on it. But it's got great roles for Susanna Thompson, Iman Walker. I already said Sebastian Stan, Dylan Baker. Wes Studi is fantastic as like the head of the secret police. It's packed to the rafters with really, really talented people in a super interesting show. And Kings is a quick watch. There's only 13 of them, I believe.
Yeah. I remember as I told Ryan, I remember watching the first episode, liking it a lot, and then I just never came back around to it.
Yeah, it's too bad. But you probably alone couldn't have saved it.
No. As influential as I am.
It's written by Michael Green, who is that right? Michael Green? Yeah. Yeah, Michael Green, who's doing Ian McShane's latest show, American Gods, but he's also the screenwriter for Logan, the last Wolverine movie, for the latest Blade Runner 2049. He's a really good writer, and that writing is in Kings. He's well represented by that show.
The number one show for each of our lists.
Yeah, we got two number ones.
Yeah,
this
two
is
number
a weird
ones.
list, I guess. Sorry about that.
And your show, fresh off the super success of the Battlestar Galactica reboot.
Yeah.
They decided to do a prequel called Caprica.
Yeah, Caprica's the prequel to the 2004 Battlestar Galactica. It's a young Adama. He's just a kid. Edward James Olmos' character is like a 10-year-old or whatever. Yeah. And so it's the story of his father and his uncle, who are kind of a part of organized crime. His uncle's very much a part of it. His father's sort of in and out, trying to get out. Esai Morales plays his partner. He's fantastic. But what it's really about is this other couple, played by Eric Stoltz brilliantly, and Paula Malcolmson, who's always brilliant. Their daughter in the first episode gets killed in a terrorist attack. And because of work that Eric Stoltz, he's a scientist, because of work he's doing on artificial intelligence, he's managed to capture a bit of her soul based on this sort of, what's the movie we were just raving about from last year, the Spielberg film?
Ready Player One.
Yeah, Ready Player One. She has spent all this time in this alternate virtual reality universe, and because of that, he's got this sort of blueprint of what she is. Whatever makes her synapses, he doesn't know. But he's a desperate grieving father, and he kind of steals that, puts it in a computer, and that becomes, you don't really get to see it happen because, again, the show was cut short. Yeah. But that's clearly going to become the religious basis for the Cylons as they evolve. Yeah. It's the ghost in the machine that's going to make them the dangerous thing that they're becoming. But it's about terrorism, it's about religion, it's about all these heavy things. Yep. It's Deep Space Nine compared to Battlestar Galactica's The Next Generation. Yeah. Everybody, myself included, and I loved Caprica, would have gladly traded Caprica for a 5th season of Battlestar Galactica. Yeah. You know what I mean? And Sci-Fi and their wisdom shortened that from 5 seasons to 4, which is, I don't know why they did that. They never had a better show than that. They never will have a better show than that. Why didn't they just let that roll? I know it was expensive. It wasn't watched by people, but those things are the gifts that keep on giving. People still buy Galactica. They still watch it, stream it, whatever. It's a bummer that was canceled. This was a huge letdown. But it's
still
too
a
bad.
Good show.
It's a great show. It's number one on my list.
It's a great show.
It's a great show. It's got great effects. It's got great sort of cityscapes and architectural stuff.
It was really, really ambitious.
It's super smart.
And,
the teen actors are fantastic in it.
Yep.
It's got great side characters for Meg Tilly, of all people. Patton Oswalt is great in it. Polly Walker's great. It's really good. Caprica, if you like Galactica, again, come back to Caprica knowing that it's something different. Give it a try.
I think you hit on the head. That's why it didn't. It's why it didn't take. It's very different. It's in that world. It's in that universe of Battlestar Galactica, but it's very different than.
It's a
Galactica.
Thriving 12 colonies. You know, this is the capital, richest colony.
Yep.
But as far as artificial intelligence and exploring the ideas behind that and the obsession behind it is really good. Eric Stoltz is really, really great on the show.
So my number one, actually, I don't need to say too much about. This is a show that is a giant cult classic.
We've already talked about it.
Yeah, we've talked about it. It's come up already on the show.
It's Firefly. Joss Whedon's Firefly.
Yeah.
It was. It's kind of almost become the prototype of the show that was cut short. In this case, Firefly had a chance to do a movie to wrap it up. That's how much fans
and it's
love,
a much less tragic canceling because of that movie. That movie
exactly.
really does.
It helps a ton.
Yeah, it healed a lot of things. Yeah, not everything, but a lot of things.
Yeah, the show itself. Of course, gave us Nathan Fillion, Alan Tudyk.
Yeah, pulled him out of the soap operas.
Yep.
Thank you.
Marina Baccarin. Who's
8 plus 8? I called it.
Yeah. Ron Glass, who I loved from his
Barney Miller.
From Barney Miller.
Well, he's good. And he's great on Firefly.
Yeah, he's
you
great
could tell
on
he was
Firefly,
waiting around to bite off a piece of something, and that show gave him a great character.
Yep, Summer Glau, who's
more or less introduced there. She was sort of introduced on Buffy in one episode, but made her presence known on
and actors like Jewel Staite, Gina Torres, Sean Maher,
do we say Adam Baldwin?
Oh, and Adam Baldwin. I
just don't want to leave all. We want to get all
Baldwin.
8 in.
Yeah, no, I totally. In fact, I forgot to write it down here.
If you're a sci-fi fan and you haven't seen Firefly, what are you waiting
doing?
for?
Yeah, it's great.
If you're a fan of funny, and surprisingly scripted television, what are you waiting for? It's fantastic.
I don't need to say anything more about it. Go see it. Seek it out. You can find it. It's how they do marathons of it, like every year on Sci-Fi and stuff.
Yeah, we love it. We're gonna talk about it some more. You can count on it.
Yeah,
it's coming.
It's a very common reference from me.
Yeah, we love it.
I'll tell you what. Let's rip through some hot takes. What do you say?
Let's get some hot takes. Let's get some hot takes. Let's get some hot takes. Let's get some hot takes.
Let's get some hot takes. I peeked out there.
Yeah, you're a little
all right,
horse.
so here's
and I can't edit it out because you did it at the end of the jingle.
That's all right. That's all right. I got a little horse peeked out there. It's fine. Okay, hot take number 1.
We won't put it on your demo tape.
No. There has never been a perfect movie trilogy. Jason Bourne comes close.
No, it doesn't.
Dark Knight trilogy.
That maybe you could argue that comes close.
Lord of the Rings.
That comes really close.
But there has never been a fully perfect trilogy. There's always...
Yeah, no, it's tough because the chances go down with each movie. You know what I mean?
So that's less of a hot take. That's more of a mild take.
Well, it's not bad because I never really thought of it, so I kind of like it. It gets us into those big giant movies, right?
Yep.
Lord of the Rings comes close. I think the original Star Wars certainly comes close. But you can poke holes in different pieces and different episodes of this stuff.
Yep.
Lord of the Rings is 10 hours. It's like they aren't all going to be perfect.
Well, yeah, the 3 to 4 endings of the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
In that final in Return of the
So
King.
I have to agree with that hot take. Even though I want to stand up. I want to stand up for the Matrix films. I want to stand up for the original 3 Pirates of the Caribbean films. There are films where we've, even Dark Knight Rises, where we've taken our little, meddling disappointment, or little complaints, and turned them into these massive tragic flaws that I think they really aren't.
Yep.
But I have to agree, it's tough to make a perfect trilogy. It's almost impossible to make a perfect one-a-G.
That's a very good point.
Is that a word?
Yeah, it is now.
All right.
All right. So this next hot take comes from at Taliesin Evitel. I do like this. Taliesin.
That is a
Evitel.
really cool name.
This one is okay. I like this one. While The Lion King 1994 and the upcoming 2019 Lion King both look amazing, in 2030, The Lion King 1994 will still look amazing, while Lion King 2019 will look like a movie made of old CGI. It's a little convoluted. Were you able to follow that? It's a little convoluted.
No, I followed it perfectly. I'm sorry, I'm coughing because I'm laughing out loud, which is something I don't often do in front of you folks. Because it makes me look silly. I'll just say it. That's a joke. It's not even a hot take. I don't even know what to say. You win because your joke was super funny. I don't know if that's true or not. It's hard to say. We'll have to see it.
Obviously, we don't know them, but just this is based solely on the trailer that we've seen.
I think that
the upcoming Lion King.
I think that the Planet of the Apes movies will survive and be loved, even if they're picked apart, just because there's such great stories. The Lion King, the story of Hamlet, really. Yeah. It's a great story, but I think there's truth to that. I don't want to completely agree with it because I'm not going to judge. You know what I mean? I think
what the nugget, the kernel of what's dealing with is that 2D animation will actually, because of its rudimentary, quote unquote rudimentary animation, will actually hold up better over time.
Yeah.
Than something trying to look
photoreal.
Photoreal.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's almost entirely made up thing.
Yeah.
I can't transfer myself into the future to really look back on it and see. And we can't look far enough back on CGI. We can look back to primitive CGI films that look terrible by today's standards. But today's standards, CGI is really, really good. So we'll see what they come up with. But I do like that. I watched the Beauty and the Beast, which I think is lovely. I think the animation Beauty and the Beast is perfect. And this live-action remake is tough. It's in the shadow of kind of a perfect movie, but it really, really good. But it helps that they're candlesticks and stuff. You know what I mean? That helps. Yeah. That's going to help that in the long run. They're not, it's
actual.
Yeah. They are animated. They're animated to look photoreal, but they're still these animated things, reanimated, you might even say.
All right. Here's another hot take.
Yeah.
Marvel should digitally insert Stan Lee into all future Marvel Cinematic Universe movies.
Yeah, why not? If you've tolerated all those stupid Stan Lee cameos up till this point, then I don't see why you couldn't do that. Do it.
Good.
They're all stupid and they're all awful, and I know you guys love them, but they're stupid. But they don't ruin the movies. They don't, it's like, so do it. You can do it. You have the technology. If his spirit lives on in these little, 32-second per movie, honestly, I don't think that, I hate stuff like this.
Yeah.
But in this case, because it'd be so easy to do and so little harm would be done.
Yep.
Don't bring them back to sell beer or whatever during the Super Bowl. That'll piss me off.
Don't product place with
exactly. I'm not going to like that. But if you want them in your Marvel movie still and you can find a way to do it and the jokes somehow don't seem stale to you, more power to you. Do it.
Hot take. In the age of the internet, which we are currently in, as all of you know, that was the weirdest.
Somebody out there doesn't know yet, and you just ruined his day.
Our one Amish listener who has somehow discovered podcasts, but not the internet.
He's not happy.
All end credits, TV and in movies, all end credits should be eliminated. Just replace them with a link to a website. And that is where all those people can be.
Absolutely not. And when Netflix cuts away from end credits of some movie that just moved me profoundly and starts playing advertising for whatever piece of crap thing that they just created, I get angry, viscerally angry. Those credits, you don't have to watch them. You can change the channel. You can fast forward. You can pop the disc out. You can walk out of the theater. But everybody should be on there. They're crediting like the trumpet players in the orchestra now. Mm-hmm. And they should. Those trumpet players contributed to the success or failure of that movie. That movie's a collaborative art. Big movies are made by millions of people, and every single person who worked on it, one way or another, should get their day in the sun. Their grandma or their girlfriend could sit there and see that name go by, and if you don't like it, you can suck it.
Full disclosure, I knew that was going to get this kind of reaction. That's why I put it in there. Yeah,
you're just poking at me.
I poked you on
the bear.
And of course, in reality, I fully do agree with you. But that was my hot take.
That was a hot take.
Final hot take.
Steaming hot.
Steaming hot take. Final hot take. The National Treasure movies are indeed a national treasure.
No, not
okay.
Really.
I buy that.
They're not the worst things in the world. They're not evil or whatever, but they're not great. And they kind of rip off the Dan the man who made Da Vinci Code and whatever.
Oh yeah, Dan Brown.
Yeah, very much they're okay.
It's more of clever wordplay,
I guess.
Which wasn't.
I saw that meme on the Facebook the other day when I was loading one of the shows. It said had a little picture of Nick, and it said, "Now that the government shut down, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence."
That's a good meme.
That made me laugh.
That's a solid meme.
And anything that made me laugh last week can't be an entirely bad thing.
There you go.
But they're not a classic. No.
You want to do one quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You want to hit the sounder?
Oh yeah, ask Joel and Ryan.
I have a question. Who gave you the right to play God?
What the hell's going on out here?
Why do I bother?
What is the point in doing anything?
How dare you!
What more do you want from me?
I have a question.
Let's end this wonderful episode with this question that I mean this is a big time. This show's already running really long, but I want to make sure that we get this and get this in.
Yeah, let's do it.
What kind of animal makes the best cinematic sidekick?
It's a tie between a dog and a robot dog.
I would concur. I would give the edge to the real life dog.
I don't know. The robot dog is great. I'm giving it a tie.
All right. That'll do it for us.
They're both dogs. They're both man's best friend.
They are indeed, and any other answer other than dog is incorrect.
I agree.
Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Yeah, we love you guys.
We love you. Please feel free to reach out to us again at Ask Joel and Ryan on Instagram and Twitter, and on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at AskJoelAndRyan.com, on gmail.com. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.
Dear Diary, today I was pompous and my sister was crazy. Today we were kidnapped by hill folk, never to be seen again. It was the best day ever.